My name is Elena Rodriguez, and at 58 years old, I discovered that everything I believed about my family was built on lies. This is the story of how uncovering the truth nearly destroyed me, but ultimately set me free. It began on a rainy Tuesday morning when I was cleaning out my late mother's attic. She had passed away 3 months earlier, leaving behind a house filled with memories and, as I would soon discover, secrets that would change my understanding of everything. I had always been the responsible daughter. While my brother Miguel lived his carefree life in California, I stayed in our hometown of San Antonio, caring for our aging mother, managing her medical appointments, and ensuring she was never alone. For 15 years, I put my own dreams on hold to be her devoted caregiver. "Elena, mija, you're too good to me," she would say during her final months. "I don't deserve such a wonderful daughter." I always brushed off her comments, thinking they were just expressions of gratitude. I had no idea they carried the weight of decades-old guilt. That morning in the attic, as I sorted through boxes of old photographs and documents, I found a manila envelope tucked behind a stack of Christmas decorations. It was labeled Elena the Truth in my mother's handwriting. Inside were documents that made my hands tremble. Medical records, legal papers, and a letter addressed to me in my mother's careful script. As I read, the foundation of my identity crumbled. "Mi querida Elena," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then God has finally given me the courage to tell you what I should have told you 40 years ago. You are not my biological daughter." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had to read the sentence 3 times before it registered. The letter continued. "When you were 3 years old, your birth mother, my sister Carmen, was killed in a car accident. Your father had abandoned you both years earlier. You had no one, mija. So I took you in and raised you as my own. I never legally adopted you because I was young, scared, and didn't understand the system." My legs gave out, and I sank onto an old trunk. Everything I knew about myself was a lie. The woman I had spent 15 years caring for, the woman I called mother, was actually my aunt. But there was more. The envelope contained copies of a will, not my mother's will, but my birth mother Carmen's will. According to the documents, Carmen had owned a successful restaurant and several properties. She had left everything to her daughter, to me. When Carmen died, my mother's letter continued. Her lawyer couldn't find any family members. Miguel and I were young and foolish. We were scared that if we came forward, they might take you away from us and put you in foster care. So we said nothing. We let the state claim Carmen's assets as abandoned property. I discovered that my inheritance, the restaurant, the properties, everything, had been sold by the state 20 years ago. The money had gone into government coffers, not to the family that should have claimed it. The most devastating part came in the final paragraph. "Elena, Miguel has known the truth all along. He was 12 when Carmen died and old enough to understand. I made him promise never to tell you. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was only protecting myself from losing you." Miguel knew. My brother, whom I had supported emotionally and financially for years, knew that I wasn't his biological sister and had never said a word. I called him immediately, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "Elena, I can explain," he said before I could even speak. Somehow, he already knew I had found the letter. "You've had 40 years to explain," I replied. 40 years while I believed we were family. "We are family," he insisted. "Biology doesn't change that." "Biology doesn't change it, but lies do. You watched me sacrifice my entire life to take care of a woman who wasn't even my mother, and you said nothing." The conversation revealed even more painful truths. Miguel admitted that he had always felt guilty about the inheritance I never received. But instead of telling me the truth, he had rationalized it by telling himself that the money was gone anyway. So what was the point of hurting me? "You don't understand, Elena. You were so devoted to Mama. Telling you the truth would have destroyed that relationship. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me? Or protecting yourself from having to share the responsibility of caring for her?" His silence was all the answer I needed. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Every memory I had of my childhood was now tainted with the knowledge that it was built on deception. The woman I had mourned as my mother was actually the aunt who had stolen my inheritance and my identity. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. I had given up marriage, children, career advancement, travel, everything, to care for someone who had been lying to me my entire life. My friend Rosa, a retired social worker, finally intervened when she found me still in my pajamas at 3 p.m., surrounded by empty takeout containers and tissues. "Elena, you need help. Professional help. This trauma is eating you alive." She was right. I started seeing Dr. Martinez, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and identity issues. "Elena," Dr. Martinez said during one of our sessions, "you're grieving not just the loss of your mother, but the loss of your entire understanding of yourself. That's a profound trauma." Through therapy, I began to untangle the complex web of emotions. Yes, I felt betrayed and angry, but I also began to understand the impossible position my aunt had been in, a young woman suddenly responsible for a traumatized 3-year-old child. "She made mistakes," Dr. Martinez said, "but her fundamental motivation was love. She wanted to protect you, even if her methods were flawed." The therapy also helped me see my own strength. Despite being built on lies, my childhood had still been filled with love and care. The woman I called mother had genuinely devoted her life to raising me well, but understanding didn't erase the pain. I was 58 years old and had to rebuild my entire sense of self. The legal research I conducted was both fascinating and frustrating. I contacted lawyers to see if there was any way to recover my inheritance, but the statute of limitations had long passed. The restaurant that should have been mine was now a chain pharmacy. The properties had been developed into a shopping center. However, one lawyer, Mrs. Chen, gave me some unexpected news. "Elena, while you can't recover the original inheritance, there's something else you should know. Your birth mother Carmen had a life insurance policy that was never claimed. Insurance companies are required to hold unclaimed policies much longer than other assets. After months of paperwork and legal procedures, I received a check for $75,000, the proceeds from Carmen's life insurance policy, with 40 years of accumulated interest. It wasn't the fortune I had lost, but it was something. More importantly, it was acknowledgement that Carmen Rodriguez had existed, that she had loved her daughter enough to plan for her future. With that money, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of using it for retirement or the travel I had always dreamed of, I established the Carmen Rodriguez Foundation for Orphaned Children. "Elena, that's noble, but what about your own future?" Rosa asked. "This is my future," I replied. "For 40 years, I lived someone else's version of my life. Now I'm going to live my own." The foundation provides legal assistance to families navigating adoption and guardianship, and financial support for children who have lost their parents. It's my way of honoring both Carmen, the mother I never really knew, and the aunt who raised me despite her flaws. Running the foundation introduced me to a community I never knew existed. Families formed through tragedy, love that transcends biology, and children who have had to rebuild their identities just as I did. I met James, a social worker who became my closest advisor for the foundation. He had been adopted as a teenager and understood the complex emotions of family identity better than anyone. "Elena," he told me one day as we reviewed grant applications, "your story isn't uncommon. Families have been creating themselves out of love and necessity for generations. What's remarkable is how you've turned your pain into purpose." Our friendship slowly grew into something deeper. At 59, I found myself falling in love for the first time in decades. James saw me not as the dutiful daughter or the betrayed victim, but as Elena, complex, strong, and worthy of love. My relationship with Miguel slowly began to heal, though it would never be the same. He started volunteering with the foundation, perhaps trying to work off decades of guilt. "I know I can never make up for not telling you," he said during one of our volunteer days. "But maybe I can help make sure other kids don't get lost in the system the way you did." It was a start. The most unexpected part of this journey was reconnecting with my birth mother's memory. Through old friends and former employees of her restaurant, I learned about Carmen Rodriguez, a vibrant, hardworking woman who had loved her daughter fiercely despite her circumstances. Mrs. Gutierrez, who had worked as Carmen's cook, shared stories that brought tears to my eyes. Elena, your mother talked about you constantly. She was saving every penny for your education. She had dreams of sending you to college, maybe even medical school. She would say, "My little Elena is going to be somebody special." Learning about Carmen didn't diminish my memories of the aunt who raised me, but it added another layer to my understanding of love and sacrifice. Both women had shaped me in their own ways. The foundation grew beyond my wildest expectations. Within 2 years, we had helped over 300 families navigate legal issues and provided scholarships to 50 young people aging out of foster care. The work was emotionally demanding but incredibly fulfilling. Every family we helped, every child whose future we secured, felt like a step toward healing not just for them, but for the 3-year-old girl inside me who had lost everything. On the 3rd anniversary of finding my mother's letter, I stood in the community center where we held our annual foundation fundraiser. The room was filled with families we had helped, donors who believed in our mission, and volunteers who had become my chosen family. James stood beside me as I addressed the crowd. 3 years ago, I thought my life was ending, I said. I discovered that everything I believed about my identity was wrong. But I've learned that our stories don't end with the discovery of painful truths. Sometimes they're just beginning. I looked around the room at faces both familiar and new. Family isn't just who raises you or who shares your DNA. Family is who shows up when you need them, who celebrates your victories and supports you through failures. Family is who helps you become the person you're meant to be. After the event, as James and I walked home under the stars, he asked me if I ever regretted learning the truth. Never, I said without hesitation. The truth hurt terribly, but it also freed me. For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on who I really am, not who I thought I was supposed to be. And who are you, Elena Rodriguez? He asked, smiling. I thought about it for a moment. I'm Carmen's daughter, and I'm the little girl that my aunt loved enough to raise as her own. I'm someone who learned that betrayal and love can coexist, that families can be broken and rebuilt, and that it's never too late to write a new chapter of your story. 6 months later, James and I were married in a small ceremony at the community center. Miguel walked me down the aisle, and Rosa served as my matron of honor. The families from our foundation filled the seats, creating the most beautiful, diverse gathering of love I had ever seen. We didn't have a traditional reception. Instead, we held a celebration that doubled as a fundraiser for the foundation. It seemed fitting. Our love story had grown out of service to others, so why not celebrate it the same way? As I write this now, at age 61, I can honestly say that discovering the truth about my family was the most painful and the most liberating experience of my life. The foundation has grown to serve families across Texas, and James and I have built a life filled with purpose and genuine joy. I still visit my aunt's grave every month, bringing fresh flowers and updates about the foundation. I've forgiven her for the lies because I understand now that she was doing what she thought was best with the limited wisdom of a frightened young woman. I also make regular visits to Carmen's grave, which I finally located after months of searching through old cemetery records. I tell her about the foundation, about the children we've helped, about the life I've built from the ashes of everything I thought I knew. Mama, I said during my last visit, using the name I never got to call her in life. I hope I'm making you proud. I hope the woman I've become honors both the love you gave me and the love I received. The most important lesson I've learned is that our identities aren't fragile things that shatter at the first sign of contradiction. We are resilient, adaptable beings, capable of integrating even the most shocking revelations into new, stronger versions of ourselves. My story isn't about the family that lied to me or the inheritance that was stolen from me. It's about the family I chose, the community I built, and the woman I became when I finally learned to write my own story. Sometimes people ask me what I would change if I could go back and do it all over again. The answer is nothing. Every moment of pain, every revelation, every difficult choice led me to where I am today. And where I am today is exactly where I belong. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I am 61 years old, and this is the story of how losing my identity helped me find my true self. If you're reading this and struggling with your own family secrets or identity crisis, please know that the story doesn't end with the revelation. The most beautiful chapters are often written after we think the book is finished. Trust in your resilience. Believe in your ability to rebuild. And remember that sometimes the most authentic life begins the moment we stop living the life others expected us to live. The foundation continues to grow, touching more lives each year. James and I have started talking about adoption, giving a child the kind of love and honesty that every child deserves. At 61, I'm not too old to be a mother. I'm just old enough to do it right. But before I close this chapter of my story, I need to tell you about the most unexpected discovery that came 2 years after finding my aunt's letter. It would test everything I thought I had learned about forgiveness and family. I was at the foundation office late one evening, reviewing applications for our college scholarship program, when I received a phone call that would once again turn my world upside down. "Is this Elena Rodriguez?" asked an elderly woman's voice. "Yes, this is Elena. My name is Sister Margaret Mary. I'm calling from St. Catherine's Retirement Home in Austin. I have some information about your birth mother, Carmen Rodriguez, that I believe you should know." My heart began to race. "What kind of information?" "I worked with Carmen at the restaurant many years ago, before I entered religious life. I've been following the news about your foundation, and I realized who you were. There's something your aunt never knew, something Carmen made me promise to keep secret." Sister Margaret asked if I could visit her the next day. I barely slept that night, wondering what other secrets my family had kept buried. The drive to Austin felt endless. James insisted on coming with me, sensing that whatever Sister Margaret had to reveal would be significant. St. Catherine's was a peaceful place with gardens and quiet corridors. Sister Margaret, now 79 years old, met us in a sunny parlor. She had kind eyes, but carried herself with the weight of someone who had held on to difficult secrets for too long. "Elena," she began, "your mother Carmen was pregnant again when she died." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She was 3 months pregnant with your sister. She hadn't told anyone except me because she was scared. The father wasn't in the picture, and she was struggling to support you both already." I felt James take my hand as the room seemed to spin around me. "Carmen was planning to tell your aunt, but she was waiting for the right time. She died before she could have that conversation." The medical examiner noted the pregnancy in the autopsy report, but since there were no known family members at the time, the information was filed away. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask. Sister Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Because I've carried this secret for 40 years, and when I saw what you were doing with the foundation, helping families find each other, I realized I couldn't take this to my grave. Carmen would have wanted you to know you had a sister." A sister. I had spent my entire life believing Miguel was my only sibling, only to discover he wasn't my brother at all. Now I was learning I had a sister I never knew existed, who had died before she could be born. The drive home was silent. James and I both struggled to process what this meant for my understanding of my story. "Elena," he said finally, "this doesn't change anything about who you are now, doesn't it?" I replied. "For 60 years I've been the only child of Carmen Rodriguez. Now I discover I was supposed to be an older sister. I was supposed to protect someone, to help raise someone, to share this journey with someone." The grief I felt was different from anything I had experienced before. I was mourning the loss of a relationship that had never existed, a sister I had never met, conversations we would never have, and support we could never give each other. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that this was what psychologists call ambiguous loss, grief for someone who was never really part of your life, but should have been. "Elena, you're grieving not just for the sister who died, but for the version of yourself who would have been a big sister. That's a profound identity shift at this stage of your life." I found myself spending hours wondering what she would have been like. Would she have had Carmen's fierce determination? Would we have supported each other through the challenges of growing up without parents? Would she have been the one to take care of our aunt in her final years, freeing me to live my own life sooner? These thoughts led me to make a decision that surprised everyone. I wanted to have Carmen's body exhumed so that my sister could be properly acknowledged and buried with dignity. It was a complicated legal process that took months to complete. Miguel was initially resistant. "Elena, what's the point? It's been 40 years. Let the dead rest in peace." "The point," I told him, is that my sister deserves to be acknowledged. She deserves to have her existence recognized, even if it was brief. The legal battles were exhausting and expensive, but the Foundation's supporters rallied around me. Many of them had their own stories of lost siblings, unacknowledged pregnancies, and family secrets that had shaped their lives. Mrs. Chen, the lawyer who had helped me recover Carmen's life insurance, worked on the exhumation case pro bono. "Elena, this isn't just about your sister," she told me. "This is about recognizing that every life has value, no matter how brief." When the day finally came for the reburial, I stood at a cemetery outside San Antonio with James, Rosa, Miguel, and dozens of people from the Foundation community. Father Rodriguez, who had become our Foundation's spiritual advisor, conducted a small service. "We gathered today to acknowledge Isabella Carmen Rodriguez," he said, using the name I had chosen for my sister. "Though her life was brief, her impact continues through her sister's work and the families this foundation has helped." I placed a small pink rose on the casket, thinking about all the conversations Isabella and I would never have, all the support we could have given each other, all the ways our lives might have been different. But I also felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in my life, my family felt complete, not because we were all physically present, but because everyone was finally acknowledged and honored. After the service, Miguel approached me with tears in his eyes. "Elena, I've been thinking a lot about what family means. I know I'm not your biological brother, but you've been more of a sister to me than I ever deserved. And now with Isabella, I feel like I understand something about love that I didn't before." "What's that?" I asked. "That love isn't diminished by being shared with people who aren't there. Loving Isabella doesn't make you love me less, or love Carmen less, or love the aunt who raised us less. Love just expands." He was right. Learning about Isabella hadn't taken anything away from my other relationships. Instead, it had added another dimension to my understanding of family and connection. The Foundation established a new program in Isabella's memory, support groups for women who have experienced pregnancy loss and parents grieving stillborn children. Sister Margaret became one of our first volunteer counselors. "Elena," she told me during one of our planning meetings, "I think Carmen would be amazed by what grew from the seeds of her love. You, the Foundation, this community, it's all part of her legacy." But the most profound change came in my relationship with James and our discussions about adoption. Learning about Isabella made me realize that parenthood isn't just about the children we raise, but about the love we carry for all the children who touch our lives, even briefly. We decided to foster teenagers, young people aging out of the system who needed support transitioning to adulthood. It seemed fitting that our family would be built around helping young people find their place in the world. Our first foster daughter was Maria, a 16-year-old who had been in the system since she was 8. She was initially suspicious of our motives. "Why do you want to help me?" she asked during her first week with us. "What's in it for you?" "Honestly," I replied, "I spent most of my life not knowing who my real family was. I want to help you figure out who your real family is, whether that's us or people you haven't met yet." Maria had been told by previous foster families that she was difficult and ungrateful. But I recognized something in her defensive posture that reminded me of myself, someone who had been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect her. Over the months, as Maria learned to trust us, she began to share her dreams. She wanted to be a social worker, to help other kids in the system. With the Foundation's scholarship program, we were able to help her get into college. "Elena," she said on the day she left for university, "you taught me that family isn't about who gave birth to you. It's about who shows up when you need them." Watching Maria drive away to start her new life felt like everything had come full circle. The lost little girl inside me, who had wondered her whole life about her real family, had finally found peace by helping another lost girl find her way home. We went on to foster 6 more teenagers over the following years. Some stayed in touch, some didn't, but each one taught us something about resilience, about the capacity of young people to heal from trauma, and about the many different ways families can form and reform. The Foundation expanded to include a residential program for young adults aging out of foster care. We purchased the building that had once housed Carmen's restaurant. It had been abandoned for years after the pharmacy chain moved to a newer location. "It's perfect," James said as we walked through the empty space. Carmen's restaurant becomes a place where young people can learn to cook, to work together, to build the skills they need for independent living. We renovated the space to include apartments, upstairs for program participants and a community, kitchen downstairs where they could learn job skills and food service. We called it Casa Carmen, and it became the heart of our expanded foundation work. On the 5th anniversary of finding my aunt's letter, we held our biggest fundraising gala yet in the newly renovated Casa Carmen. The space was filled with families we had helped, young people who had graduated from our programs, and community supporters who had become like extended family. Maria, now a sophomore in college majoring in social work, was our keynote speaker. 5 years ago, I was an angry teenager who didn't trust anyone, she told the crowd. Elena and James didn't try to fix me or change me. They just loved me consistently until I learned to love myself. That's what real family does. As I looked around the room, I saw the faces of all the people who had become part of my chosen family. Rosa, now in her 70s but still volunteering with our programs. Miguel, who had found purpose in helping other families navigate legal adoptions. Sister Margaret, whose honesty had led to Isabella's recognition and proper burial. Dr. Martinez was there with his wife, having become not just my therapist but a friend and board member of the foundation. Mrs. Chen had brought her entire law firm, which now donated hundreds of hours annually to help families with legal issues. But the face that meant the most to me was James's. At 65, he was still the man who had seen me not as a victim of family betrayal, but as a woman capable of transforming pain into purpose. "What are you thinking about?" he asked as we stood together watching the celebration. "I'm thinking about how different this is from what I imagined my life would be when I was 35 or 45 or even 55, I replied. I thought I knew exactly what my story was. Dutiful daughter, devoted caregiver, quiet woman who didn't make waves. And now? Now I know that our stories are never finished being written. Every revelation, every loss, every unexpected turn is just another chapter, not the ending." Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home and we were cleaning up Casa Carmen, I found myself alone in the kitchen, where Carmen had once cooked meals for her customers. I could almost feel her presence, and Isabella's too. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for the foundation you gave me, even though I didn't understand it at the time. Thank you for the sister I never got to meet, but who taught me that love transcends physical presence. Thank you for the lessons about resilience, about truth, about the many different ways families can be built." James found me there a few minutes later, tears streaming down my face. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest," I replied. "I was just thinking about how grateful I am for all of it. The lies that forced me to discover truth, the betrayal that taught me about real loyalty, the loss that led me to find a purpose bigger than I ever imagined. And the 58-year-old woman who was brave enough to rebuild her entire life from scratch? Her too," I smiled. "Especially her." As we locked up Casa Carmen and headed home, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The foundation now served over 2,000 families annually. We had helped 150 young people transition successfully out of foster care. We had united dozens of families separated by tragedy, adoption, or circumstance. But more than the numbers, I thought about the individual faces. The single mother who had been able to adopt her nephew after we helped with legal fees. The grandmother who had gained custody of her grandchildren after we provided family counseling. The teenager who had reconnected with siblings after aging out of foster care. Each story was a thread in the tapestry we had woven together. A community built on the understanding that families come in many forms, that healing is possible even after profound betrayal, and that our greatest wounds can become our greatest strengths. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I am 66 years old now, and this is the complete story of how losing my identity led me to find my true calling. If you're reading this and facing your own family crisis, your own moment of devastating truth, please know that the story doesn't end with the revelation. The most meaningful chapters are often written after we think everything is over. Trust in your ability to rebuild. Believe in the possibility that your pain can become your purpose. And remember that sometimes the family we create is even stronger than the family we were given. This is my story, written in my own words, on my own terms. And after 6 decades of living other people's versions of my life, that feels exactly right.